This video is for anyone out there looking for more information on the building system within Inquisitor Martyr, or wanting some tips or ideas as to how to build their characters. In this video we're going to be going through the bolter rifle, and I'm going to be giving you my top 3 builds, as well as how to build them, how to use them and how to play with them, and hopefully that's going to get you guys going in this game, enjoying yourselves a lot more. So remember to like the video, remember to subscribe, and bear with me a couple weeks while I fix up this intro. Right, so to kick things off is one of my very favourite builds in the game, full stop. This is the single target sustain build, I'm going to call it. How it works, it focuses on using the left click and aimed ability of the bolter rifle, taking advantage of their shared armour breaking and single target damage types. The build is semi-tanky and very, very versatile at all different difficulties. It can be used for single player and it can be used for group play quite easily. The first point we start with is the range combat and the debuff trees. So we're going to knock off 5 points into the range combat tree, picking up 6% damage, 10% extra damage when kiting enemies effectively. And as well as that, in the debuff tree, we're going to have our 5 points picking up 12% damage for armor breaking, which is on our left click and aim shot. So a very nice damage boost straight away. Then we pick up a little bit of survivability, and this will make a little bit more sense in a moment. What we're going to do is put 5 points into the hit point tree, picking up another 600 health as well as a small amount of regen, and we're going to go into the defensive tree for 20% armor gain and 20% damage mitigation when in cover. Now this is very, very useful, these two, and I'll tell you why. Because our main build for this, our main points are going to be spent in the single DPS tree. We're going to have 6 points spent here, getting us 4.5% range damage, which isn't too bad, but most importantly, we're going to get 10% life on kill with a single shot. So having the extra mitigation, having the extra life from the other tree really makes sense, because we're getting 10% of our total life. Although the tooltip does imply that you are only going to get 10% of your life back when you do a one-hit kill, you actually get 10% of your life back on any kill with a single shot ability. So it's incredibly useful for giving you some sustain as you go through the game. Somewhat perhaps less favoured to group play, because if other people are getting most of the kills, you don't get as much life back. But really, I've found this build to be very useful for all situations, especially ploughing through easy content, because really you never have to use an inoculator. But that being said, it's still handy in group play at higher difficulty to get a 10% heal when killing some trash, especially if you're killing nurglings and things like that. They all still give you 10% of your life. Now we move on to build number 2, which is the single target vulnerability build. The core of this build works by applying vulnerabilities to target, which reduces their damage done and increases their damage taken. Now this is ideal for group builds in particular, and also when doing higher difficulties. Now just bear in mind that there are no points spent into survival, so this is inherently a little bit more squishy than the other builds, and perhaps slightly better focused to the Crusader, but not necessarily mandatory. For this, we're going to be focusing again on the left mouse button ability, because it applies a vulnerability on every single hit, and here's how we're going to take advantage of this. First up, within the debuff tree, we're going to put 8 points in here in total, getting us 12% damage for the left click, yet again similar to the sustain build, but more importantly in the bottom left, every stack of vulnerability on the target reduces their damage done by 3%. So that is actually, it doesn't sound like a lot, but you can stack these up very quickly, and I'm going to show you why or how. Right now we're going to go into the physical tree, where we're going to be spending 7 points to get a modest 4% physical damage. But more importantly, we're going to be getting a slow on enemies whenever we crit them, and an extra vulnerability stack, which is also stacking, on them whenever we do a crit. So we can theoretically apply 2 vulnerability stacks per hit, which will be 6% of their damage reduced. Now, as well as this, we're going to be working into the range tree and the critical hit tree to therefore pick up as much critical hit as we can. So the 2 points in the range tree are for a modest 2% range crit, and within the critical hit tree, we're going to be picking up 11% in total. We will be sacrificing 5% of our damage to do so, but it's a nice boost to your critical hit percentage. Obviously, with gear with this, you're going to be looking into stacking as much critical hit chance as you can. Critical hit damage isn't as important although it is obviously good to get some, the actual critical hit chance percentage is really what we're going for, because that's going to be applying the extra vulnerabilities, and those vulnerabilities mean that everyone in your group is going to be doing a lot more damage to that target. So again, really good for high difficulty missions and a great blast to play with. Now moving on to build number 3, this is the somewhat more janky of the builds and somewhat different. I would say that this build is perhaps slightly better suited to the harder difficulties, but it could be used in any, but it is definitely more group play focused. The core of this build works by using your right mouse button, which is your rapid fire Fleshbane anti-suppression ability, or your number 2 ability. Now obviously you can use others, but these are the two which will get the most use out of this. How this build is going to work is applying suppression damage to enemies, slowing them, and hopefully having allies applying stuns, etc. And stunned enemies within this build will be taking a lot more damage from you. Let's talk about how and why. To start off with though, we're just going to put the same points into our defense combo, I think we'll call it, from the defense tree and from the hit point tree. So we're going to be getting some extra mitigation for this character, and the reason is for this is because I find if you're doing harder difficulties, you take more damage. It kind of goes without saying, but as well as that, if you're trying to knock off suppression from key targets, you end up taking a lot of small arms fire, so I found the extra mitigation very, very useful. Now, moving on from here, we're going to go into the debuff tree and support tree as well, picking up 9% suppression damage, and giving our armor ability an extra heal, which is very handy within the harder difficulties. It basically converts the amount of focus you spend into a percentage of life that you gain, a very, very helpful ability which basically gives you an extra inoculator that can give you up to, say, a sort of 25 to 40% heal depending on what ability or armor ability you're using, so very, very good. Now, for the most important thing within this build, we're spending most of our points this time within the range tree, and here we're going to be picking up a whopping 20% damage versus stunned and slowed enemies, in addition to a bonus to reload times on the right hand side, as well as a 6% range damage bonus on the left, as well as the usual range damage bonus when you're doing a good job of kiting. So this gives the build a potentially very high damage output, but the other major strength is that you can really rinse suppression quite quickly. Yes, there are other weapons that can take down suppression quicker, arc blades for example, but this can do so from a range. You still have your aim shot ability and your left click if you want to take down an armored target, but mowing through their suppression very quickly is very, very helpful. And I found this build to be very, very useful indeed. But just remember, having people in your party that are applying the slows and stuns and shocks and freezes so you get your 20% damage bonus is quite helpful. But if you've got 4 people in the party and none of them have stuns, then you've got a bit of bad luck. So guys, that is a wrap up for today's video. I hope you found it useful. I hope it's given you a little bit of inspiration. Let me know down below in the comments what weapon you would like me to do next. Let me know what your favourite weapon is, how you like to build it even. Tell me about your build. I'd love to know, and maybe even you'll see your build come up in the next video. Guys and girls, have yourself a great weekend. Remember to like and subscribe, follow the channel. I will be following Martyr, doing lots more content like this